Kids, can you please speak to me like a couple of sentences? Is he talking? Hello?
Do you hear me?
Yes, great. Yes, I can hear you. You can also activate your camera so that we can check that as well.
Mm, it's like gray out. It says that I don't have a camera, although
Okay,
I
yeah, of
do have
course.
one.
Yeah, I just wanted to let you know that that is a possibility as well. Um, so, okay. Okay, great. When it's your turn, you just tell the remote moderator, and the remote moderator will unmute you, and then you can speak.
Okay,
Okay,
okay.
great. That's great. The quality is very good. Okay, who else is? Hello, Indy. If you can speak a couple of sentences so that we test the system. Can you hear us, Indy?
You hear? Yes, I can hear it.
Okay,
Can you
that's
hear
great.
me?
Yes, and we also have. If you have a webcam, you can turn it on, and we can project it on the screen. Do you have any presentations? No, nothing. No
No.
presentation. Okay, great. Anyone else?
Yes, but he's not connected.
Uh,
He's called Ian.
it-
Ian Mutamari. But I don't see.
All right.
Okay, if not, we just take the two of them.
And send me his email,
To
and I
Ian
will
Mutamari?
send Ian's email, and I will send him the direct link. Okay. Okay. Thank you very much. And the session will start in a couple of minutes, and hopefully everything will work well. Bye.
My name is Andrew Wyckoff. I'm Director of Science, Technology, and Industry at the OECD. It's my pleasure to be moderator for this workshop on content for development, diversifying the global content and apps market. First of all, I want to thank all of you, some of you who may be giving up a little bit of your lunchtime to participate in this workshop. I find it a very important topic, and one that we're going to unpack over the next hour or so. As all of our economies move into what are commonly called knowledge-based economies, nothing's more important than information as a raw material that then gets processed into whatever we call content and various applications. Some of the work we've done at the OECD, looking at this broadly, says that these type of intangible assets now, software, R&D, intellectual property, are worth more than the tangible assets, machinery, equipment, and structures. And when you see what moves in the economy, it's these intangible assets that contribute more to growth and productivity than the traditional tangible equipment. And ICTs allow us to produce and disseminate and preserve and use knowledge in ways we could have never thought of before. And by doing so, we maximize the benefits both economically and socially. In 2011, the OECD did a report with ISOC and with UNESCO looking at local content. We observed two large trends. One, local content is growing very quickly across the world, and two, its composition is changing, and it's no longer dominated by the large developed countries. In that analysis, we identified a few key steps for fostering the creation of local content. Certainly basic literacy, critical thinking ability are essential. On top of that, there's a need for media, information, and digital literacy skills. And we recommended in that report that policymakers should also focus on connectivity, network infrastructure, and as you'll always see in an OECD report, promoting competition to lower access prices in order to support the dissemination of local content. Not surprisingly, we showed a strong correlation between local content, infrastructure, and access prices, although we had difficulty getting to causality. But this means that local content and its dissemination is crucial, we find, because it creates a triangle of improving the communication relevant knowledge between industry, social learning, and innovation, which in turn creates a virtuous cycle and influences the rate of technology adoption. Today, we are here to discuss this in much more of a practical way, where we have a series of panelists who have proven capability and experience in these areas. I want to introduce each of them just before they speak, and I want to start off with His Excellency Minister Diego Molano, the Minister of Information Technologies and Communications from Colombia. Minister Molano, please, if you would start us off, then I'll move to Elena Galpea. Sorry.
Thank you, Andy. Good morning, everybody. Thank you all for being here. For, as Andy said, for moving your lunch to later hours and joining us today. Andy, how long time do I have?
You have 10 minutes.
10 minutes. If do you have the clicker there?
I do not.
The clicker? Thank you. I have some slides that can help me out with this. Look at the issue that I want to comment today is on this tool that we have in our hands, which is ICT, to reduce the single most important problem of the world, which is poverty. And what we should do in terms of policies, and especially what should we do as the whole industry to activate that tool. And let me show you what this is about in this very short video. This is one of the poorest areas of Latin America, the Chocó area in the Colombian Pacific area. This is African Colombian population mainly. This is an area poorer than many African countries. Colombia, in the Colombian government, we took office 4 years ago, and our main goal, of course, the first one is achieving peace. We've been in a conflict for more than 50 years, but the main issue to achieving peace is reducing poverty. 4 years ago, 38% of Colombians were under the poverty line. Now, and we focus on helping people to leave poverty. We've taken out of poverty more than 2.5 million people in just 4 years. And that's the main goal of our ICT plan, how with technology we can help reducing poverty. In order to do that, we focus on developing the whole ecosystem, the whole ICT ecosystem. And that ecosystem has 4 elements: infrastructure, services, applications, and users. In the case of Colombia, the issue about infrastructure, making sure that infrastructure is deployed everywhere, that's already solved. And it is also a good example. We deploy fiber everywhere. We deploy fiber even connecting municipalities in very remote areas in the Colombian jungle. We are deploying LTE networks in every single municipality, so that today people from the base of the pyramid are already connected. But that doesn't mean anything. Of course, the connection has some value. There are some applications, especially related to education, that really help people. But the main bottleneck is applications. Building the networks is not enough. Connecting people is not enough, and we're proving that in Colombia already. And you saw that in the video. Look at our farmers. They grow plantains and potatoes. What is the value of internet for those plantain growers? What is the value of internet to those fishermen that you saw in the video? What is the value of it? There is no value. Why? Because there is no applications for them. Let's take the single most popular business in the whole developing world, which is the little mom and pop shop. The little shop. And you see those shops everywhere. In Latin America, in Asia, in Africa. We have more than 500,000 of those shops in Colombia. Let's ask them to use internet. They say, what for? And I would talk to them a few years ago, and they would say, look at, yeah, internet is there, but I don't want to use it because this is kind of weird for me, and so there is no value for me there. So I would tell them, look at, you can manage your inventory here in this application in the cloud. And they would say, what for? I handle my inventory here in this little notebook, the same way my father did and my grandpa did. So So I would tell them, look, you can also manage your accounting here. Look at in this application also in the cloud. And they would say, well, what for? I would say, you can file your taxes better. They would say, I don't want to pay taxes. So there is no value on the net for them. Today, internet is still a tool for the rich because there is no applications for the poor. So the challenge is how we develop applications. Again, expanding infrastructure is not enough. The value of it is in applications. So in Colombia, that's the focus we have now, developing applications for that base of the pyramid. Applications that have social impact. And in order to do that, we have to develop the applications ecosystem, a local ecosystem. And we have a great opportunity in Colombia. Because, of course, in terms of those ecosystems, there are many efficient ecosystems, application ecosystems in the world. For example, the Silicon Valley. Silicon Valley is a perfect ecosystem. But you know what? Those guys in the Silicon Valley have no clue what a poor person is. They have no clue what the life of a fisherman is. They have no clue what the base of a pyramid is. We know what it is. And that's the opportunity we are now working on realizing that opportunity. Because those guys in the Silicon Valley have no clue what a small company is in Africa or Asia or Latin America. We know what the problems of those small companies are. And we have to solve those problems using technology. So we have to develop those application ecosystems locally. Americans, I'm seeing big companies are not coming to Latin America or Asia or Africa to solve our problems. We have to solve our problems ourselves. In order to do that, we have to create the right talent. And talent is the first key success factor of these ecosystems. Talent, how we train more engineers, more technicians, and how do we develop IT skills among the whole society. And that's a task that the OECD is embarked upon, IT skills as well. So talent is one of the elements. The second one is how you encourage entrepreneurship, but not in the Silicon Valley way. We have to create our own entrepreneurial systems. We cannot copy what happens in Silicon Valley or other successful ecosystems. We have to adapt it. We have to, we have to platanize, the models, In Spanish would be platanizar. We have to also create the right financial mechanisms. We cannot have the venture capital funds of the Silicon Valley going there. We have to create a different systems to finance those ecosystems, and we have to take into account the real value change. I mean, the realities that we face, and we have to transform those realities with technology. So that's the challenge we have. And then if we don't do that, we are going to be missing the opportunity to use technology to solve our problems. And the gaps are going to increase. We have to keep on closing the gaps, and the next step, again, is creating these local ecosystems to create local applications. We have many, many examples. In Colombia, we have many, many examples on how we are already delivering results on applications for our base of the pyramid in terms of business or applications for agriculture, for subsidized housing, for justice, for health, to do some inclusion. So that's the challenge we have, and that's what I wanted to talk about in this opening. Thank you.
Thank you for a great launch of this session and some fascinating things that I hope we follow up on. Let me now turn to Helani, the CEO of Learn Asia.
Thanks, Andy. My organization works in South Asia, Southeast Asia, and sometimes in the Pacific Islands, and we worry about people at the bottom of the pyramid. That is the people, or the base of the pyramid, as the minister said. Socioeconomic classification, DNE, the poorest of our societies. These people are mostly not online. In our surveys of representative sample surveys in these countries, we see an exception in countries like Indonesia, where there's very high Facebook use. And when I say very high, we're talking 9% of the bottom of the pyramid. So higher than every other country that we work in, but still not very high for the numbers you're used to. Every other country is below that. We need apps, interesting things to get these people online, but we need a whole lot of other things to get the apps working. And in some of the work that we've done on application ecosystems, together with some colleagues in India, Rajat Katuria, there are a couple of things that need to come together, right? The demand, which is primarily about the user, literacy of the user, ability to pay. Do they know about the internet? Do they know what they can do with it? Are the questions we need to ask. And in our surveys, we have 24% of the bottom of the pyramid in India who say they have never heard of the internet. So there's a big barrier to cross. Then there's the affordability barrier. Other countries have, similar numbers. Then there's the whole issue of who's developing these apps. Do we have a critical mass of application developers, network operators, and people who can develop a number of apps? What is the distribution system? What platforms are we selling through the Apple and Android platforms? Well, that's not going to really work, at least in the short term, for the bottom of the pyramid, because they don't have credit cards. We have network operator promoted operator app stores, which seem to be working as well, Android platform. But there doesn't seem to be enough marketing and advertising money spent on these things. So there are other issues that the people face. There's a payment platform issue. And then there's the whole supporting ecosystem. So let's briefly touch upon 3 countries. So our biggest neighbor, I'm from Sri Lanka, is India, right? Big player in the global software market, punches well below its weight in the app development market. There are lots of software guys in India writing apps for foreign companies. They are getting venture capital funding. Can you hear me? Oh, yeah. They're getting, now? Oh, sorry. Sorry, we had the opposite issue in the previous panel. So they are getting venture capital funding. They're being bought by Facebook. So there's real money coming into it. These are developing apps for foreign companies for developed markets. There is not much happening for the local people. Now, don't get me wrong, there are people who download iPhone apps in India. These people are not the BOP, the base of the pyramid. These people are rich people with credit cards, right? So when you look at some of the reasons why, there are sort of capability issues. Indian software app developers are great at doing certain things, but they're not really great at designing good user interfaces, right? There are cases of companies trying to find good user interface designers, and they can't find them, and you have to go from company to find that particular skill. So it's not a core competency that has developed. People who develop apps talk about the enormous amount of time they spend optimizing the app for network optimization and performance, because 3G just about came into the market. 4G is, barely available. So they're worrying about things that people in other countries don't have to worry about necessarily when they do an app. They're not worrying about the look and feel. They're trying to optimize for other things because the regulators have not done their job. Then if you're trying to make a cash payment while you're using an app, the central bank requires something, I think it's called a one-time PIN, an SMS verification that your bank has to send. So you're in the middle of an application doing a financial transaction. You need to leave the app, go to your SMS, whether it's an app or whatever, get that PIN, go back to that. Now your handshake has ended. The network is bad anyway if you are lucky that your handshake still remained. So these are practical problems in these countries that people face. In Sri Lanka, we did have problems with using PayPal, and the entrepreneur from Sri Lanka joining remotely can clarify whether this is still an issue. So these are other problems that people have. So the solution to that has been sort of multifold. So there is an emerging company called Apps Daily, right? What they do is they commission and develop apps, but they actually sell them physically through stores. They're in 80 or 100 sort of different cities. They have 1,200 touch points. It's called Apps Daily. And they sell through people who sell smartphones. So when a consumer comes in, they rely on the shop owner as sort of the advisor. Discovery is performed at this point where, what kind of phone, how much is it, what kind of data plan. Along with that, by the way, we have this couple of apps and we can sell it to you. It can back up your contacts. It can give you virus protection. It can do X and Y. It can keep your private photos private. It looks and feels like you're buying a software. It actually is a packet of that size. It has a PIN code. It's downloaded onto the computer at the point of purchase. And people pay 500 Indian rupees for that. That's about $50. So this is not the 99-cent app. People pay money for this type of thing, right? So that's one model. In Sri Lanka, we've had a different type of effort to get apps developed and promoted, and that was our third largest telecom operator, Etisalat, which ran sort of, what would they call, essentially they ran an ad saying, we are having this event where you can learn how to develop an Android app. They had 2,000 people wanting to get in. In the end, they ended up training 1,000 people. They said, if you develop the app, I will give you 70% of the revenue. I will keep 30%. I'll promote it on my sort of my own walled garden app store. And they actually came up with a decent number of apps in the short time that they ran this. They worked with a software vendor which actually provided these young hackers and techies with the test platform. So they could actually optimize their app as if it was running on the network, right, for free. And if it became popular, they could make money. Now, making money is a challenge, again, because of payment issues. So unless it's third-party advertiser-driven, you're not going to make money, right? You're going to become a cool, ranking on the app developer community, but you aren't making a lot of money. In Myanmar, which is just starting out, we have Uredu, one of the new license holders, running competitions and for app developers, and they're actually providing incubation services. So not just technical help, but how to write a business plan, how to promote your app. And I think they've selected 5 or 10 as of like last month, and are incubating these people for the next 6 months and trying to roll them out. However, again, payment remains a big problem there. We've talked to one entrepreneur who sells cars and apartment rentals in Myanmar. One of his other sideline businesses is allowing his foreign bank account, because he was during the past few years he was overseas, for other app developers to make money, because you can't send money to Myanmar easily. Most people don't have credit cards. He has a Singaporean bank account. Other app developers use his account. He makes 10% of all that money. So he's actually providing a service for other people, because there are huge problems for people to operate in these countries. So what do we do? I think a lot of, even in India, we've seen sort of governments getting into app development, trying to run camps for app developers together with Microsoft. We have seen this. They're not a bad thing, but I think if these 3 examples show to you is that operators and private sector people are willing to do the capacity building, the incubation, and the funding of app developers, right? The government needs to make sure there's enough spectrum so that people are not worried about whether your handshake is going to end when you're using an app so that the app developers can have reasonable assurances that certain apps can be run with the data requirements that they want. They should put the data out that the government has. I mean, India's most popular quote-unquote application is the railway booking service. That's run on USSD and SMS. Why should it? If real-time railway scheduling was available, this can be another app that some young entrepreneur develops, but it can't be done because the government has the data. Yeah, I think I'll stop at that. Thank you.
Sorry about that. Helene, thank you very much. And I think you've identified a number of kind of real-world practical obstacles that, again, as Minister Milano said, is pretty far from Silicon Valley, and underscore maybe some of the practical considerations that need to be made to have local content and applications get developed. That's a good segue, I think, into we're going to engage remotely two entrepreneurs who have actual real-world field experience in developing these apps. The first of all comes from Asia. His name is Indy Samajiva. He's the director of Yamu, which is, he'll explain, I presume, and I presume our technicians are bringing him online as we speak. He'll be followed by someone from Latin America, from Colombia in particular, Danielle C. Andares, who's a computer science student, but also an app developer himself. So if we're going to start with Indy.
Hi, I hope you can hear me. I'm sorry the video is not coming through. Can you hear me?
Welcome. We hear you loud and clear.
Thank you. Okay, cool. Yamu, it means let's go in Sinhala. It's a city guide, so it's like Yelp or something like that, but we have writers that cover the city actively. We don't actually focus on the bottom of the pyramid. We focus on people that can get online already, that can afford to eat out. For us, apps is just part of the customer life cycle. Like, we have a print magazine and we have a website, and those are still a lot stronger than apps, but we do see people moving towards apps, so that's a market we want to be in. But it's still not our main channel at all. The benefit, in the developing world that we get from apps is that it works without a data connection, which is a big thing for a lot of our users, including myself. I think that's what sets a lot of apps apart in the developing world. In Sri Lanka, there's a lot of hype around apps. Like, companies love to release them, they love to do press releases, but maintaining daily users is really hard, including for us. Like, a lot of apps will just launch and they'll disappear. It's like a hype thing. People like the word app, but they're not necessarily using the technology. One of the problems we have around apps is, as Helani mentioned, payments. There simply just is no way for us to do in-app payments. PayPal doesn't work with us, Google Play doesn't work here, Apple doesn't work here. And honestly, I don't know if they ever will. So it's hard for us to, like, we do pizza delivery, but we have to do cash on delivery or we have to do credit card on delivery. We can't do payment through the app. One interesting thing about the Sri Lanka market is Microsoft is trying to catch up here. So they actually offer money and support to app developers. And they say that they'll promote your app at points of sale, which shows how competition between these big guys can be good for small developers here. Honestly, I think if there was more competition between the different app stores, they might have some incentive to pay attention to us, like Microsoft does. So I won't take too long. Like I said, long term, we see it in Sri Lanka. We see it growing rapidly. Like, we went from, I would say, 0 apps and very few smartphones 2 years ago to, like, everybody on the bus has one now. So we're just hanging around and waiting for the industry to grow. That's all for me.
Indy, thank you very much. I think that's very helpful and adds to our discussion. Again, I think you've touched on a few things that Helene has touched on as too, particularly the barrier of payments, which seems to be a non-insignificant issue. I think we're almost ready to go to our second in the field developer, Danielle, coming to us from Colombia. Danielle, are you there?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Danielle, welcome to Istanbul and to the IGF. We welcome hearing about your local experience.
Okay. So I have worked in this event that are brought by Diego Molano, that is right there, and I have developed two applications. The first one is an application for an emergency institute here in Colombia. These apps enable to the common citizen to report several kinds of natural disasters and emergencies. These reports include geolocation, a picture taken by the user, and all the data is actually sent to their servers in order today to have their all in mind and strategize their actions. The second app is more for the farmers market, for the mom and pop shops, like Diego told us, and it's actually kind of a showcase in where they can show their fruits, their vegetables, and they can try to compete against big supermarkets, because here in Bogota, in Colombia, there are great products in these markets, and they are cheaper, they are fresh, but people doesn't buy it because they don't know how easy it is to buy from them. We actually got some help from the government. We got paid by them for each of these applications, and they gave us support. They gave us some mobile devices, which is nice, at the first event, and that's about all the help that they gave us. And it was very helpful. We will be grateful if they maybe will give us some help designing user interfaces, like another panelist said. It ain't easy for us engineers to design those interfaces, and it is the key to get to the real customer.
Okay, Daniel,
And that's it.
That's very helpful, and I take from your discussion you've got some specific, thanks to the government of Colombia, but also some recommendations on next steps that they could undertake to further develop the apps area. And if I heard you correctly, you were talking about user interfaces and more of the direct implementation. Is that right? Maybe we've lost Danielle, which is...
Yes, I am here. I'm here. Yes, we at first were 3 engineers, but we didn't have idea about designing interfaces, so we had to subcontract a designer in order to finish the app, both of the apps. So it will be really nice to help us in that topic.
Okay. Thank you, and thank you again for getting up pretty early in the morning to join us. It's 4 a.m. Yeah, or staying up late. Thank you, Danielle. Let me now turn to Bonfes Witaba from the Internet Governance Advocate, and he's an e-learning tutor. Bonfes.
Okay, thank you very much. As the moderator said, my name is Boniface Witaba from Kenya. First of all, I'll briefly talk about Afrinic Fire Award program, whose main aim is to promote the creation of solutions through ICT. Just a minute. Sorry. The Afrinic is for the benefit of everyone, Afrinic is the regional internet registry for Africa and the Indian Ocean. They have a grant award program whose main aim is to encourage and support the development of solutions to information and communication needs in the African region. The award usually supports 3 categories. That's first of all, innovation, access, promotion, and the second one, e-development, and then freedom of expression. FIRE is a part of the Seed Alliance program, the ICF, and EPNIC, Asia Pacific. They're usually partnering with organizations such as IDRC, SIDA, and the Afrinic. And then to my point, my Kenyan scenario, I represent the Witaba Foundation. And we run an initiative called Open Educational Resources for Schools. The main aim of the project is to seek the integration of ICT into the Kenyan education curriculum. As the Kenyan government recently launched an initiative to provide free laptops for primary schools in Kenya, but there was the issue of content. So we decided to take it up to ourselves to fill the gap of content by creating free, high quality free digital Creative Commons textbooks to provide them to schools through a centralized portal. The main aim is to break the lockbox on education and provide an unencumbered ICT use to the primary school kids. We envision that this project will be able to equalize access to learning content to both the educators and the learners. Our pilot project currently is targeting 250 pupils from 2 schools, but we aim to scale it up to 1,000 classrooms. That's about 50,000 students. Then again, just to mention for the benefit of everyone, just the other day we won an award for the innovation in development for the same project. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Bonfis. And let me now end by turning to Konstantinos Komatitis, Policy Advisor of the Internet Society. Konstantinos.
Thank you very much, Andy, and good afternoon, everybody. I would like to thank, first of all, the Colombian government for their kind invitation, and because I know that local content is very close to their heart, and there has been an ongoing work, and which I find particularly interesting, that over the past few years, local content has been picked up in such a fashion, because at the end of the day, it was always local content is inextricably linked to development, and ever since the internet, the commercialization of the internet, issues of content, of course, have proven to be extremely beneficial in whatever sense we might see them. So, Andy mentioned the report that the OECD, UNESCO, and the Internet Society did in 2011, and one of the issues that was also identified is that at this point in time, we really cannot provide a clear definition of what local content stands for. So I would like all of you, for the purposes especially of evolving the discussions, to think of local content in the widest of senses, from blogs to applications to wherever essentially is relevant for locally or is produced locally. So when I am talking about local content, and when I am thinking about local content, I always associate it with incentives. The first word that comes into my head is providing those incentives. And in order to do that, and I'm going back to what the minister said, something that I found particularly interesting is, the question that is being asked from the fishermen, from the farmers, what does the internet have to do with me? right? I am waking up at 4 o'clock in the morning, and I am going and I fish, and it's really hard, and I go back and I try to sell my fish locally in my own region. And this reveals the fact that we need to do more in order to be able and make people understand the values of the internet. And one of these values for the local fisherman or for the local farmer is the fact that they can learn from one another, right? They can exchange information, they can disseminate that information, they can produce information that similar communities in other parts of the world can take, adopt them, reject them, however, go through a deliberative process that will allow them actually to understand how similar communities are working in other parts of the world. So the Internet Society has been doing a lot of work in the context of local content to the extent of building the infrastructure that will allow the production of this content. And by that infrastructure, I am referring to the Internet exchange points, or occasionally you will hear them referenced as IXPs. And basically there are boxes that allow the traffic to travel locally. Right now, in many, many parts of the world, in Africa, for example, is a very clear case. The traffic from Kenya needs to go through Paris in order to bounce, or Germany to bounce back to Kenya. And this is expensive. And this is very expensive for all the parties concerned in this traffic exchange, if you want. And especially, it is something which raises the costs, which a lot of people cannot afford, and which, as you can understand, does not provide those incentives that are necessary for people to engage in the production of this content. So this is the first point. The second point, and again, I'm going to revert back to what the minister said, is this misconception that the internet is a tool for the rich and that there is no application for the poor. And to an extent, he's right. And because we have seen this internet development happening so much in the northern hemisphere, in the western part of the world, whereby there is a lot of investment, and we are fortunate enough, for example, in Europe, to be able and have affordable connections that are fast connections, and we are able to interact with the internet in a way that other people are not allowed to. So when I'm speaking to people, especially in Africa, and we're talking about the internet, one of the things that they tell me, and it has, and has stayed with me, is you do understand that in parts of my country at 6 p.m., for example, we don't have electricity. And it's as simple as that, and that's where it all stops. So it is very important that we make sure that we provide access to people to the extent that they're able to learn the internet, to understand what it stands for, and to start interacting. And last but not least, and this is a couple of last points, I am fascinated by the application environment and the potential that this apps environment has, and everything that it has done. But before this apps environment, there is the internet architecture and the design of the internet that allows those apps to be developed and work on the internet. You wouldn't be able to create those apps. Nobody would be able to create those apps. Those entrepreneurs and the talent that we just heard them joining us remotely, if the architecture and the design of the internet was not what it is. And by that, I mean the openness of the internet and the idea of permissionless innovation, the fact that you really do not have to ask anyone's permission to create that app. So it is very important that we tell people about this benefit. We tell people that they can create things on the internet because of the way the internet is designed. And it is equally important for policymakers and regulators and governments to understand that in order to encourage us, or part of encouraging this apps environment is also respecting this very basic architecture. So in creating, therefore, these local ecosystems that are very vital for local economies, for regional economies, and eventually for the global economy, we need to do it in a way that we respect the internet, and we respect also so we don't overregulate it, we don't create clusters, we don't create obstacles that can actually prohibit people from engaging with this tool and be able to create local content that then can be disseminated, and people like me that are fascinated with what's happening around the world can take it and actually learn from it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Konstantinos. Now we've gotten through the panel as well as two remote kind of field practitioners. I'd like to open it up to questions and comments and get a dialogue started here with all of you, who again, we appreciate you cutting your lunch short to join us. I have a question. There's a question whether we have a roving microphone. So the gentleman three rows back. That would be you to start with, and then we keep going. I'm happy there are many questions. The panelists should know I'm prepared with my own, but please start. And if you could just introduce yourself briefly, and then direct, if you have a question for one of the panelists, which I hope you do, direct it directly to who it is that you're addressing. Thanks. We're starting here. I'm sorry. Oh, my apologies. Sorry. Yeah. We will start with the gentleman who has the microphone in the third row, and then we will move to you, sir, I guess. Please.
My name is Ola Pettersson. I work for the Swedish International Development Agency, SIDA, with ICT for Development. We're very interested in this issue of local content being developed, as we clearly see the link to poverty reduction. My question actually goes to all the panel, but maybe some of them will be more inclined to answer, and that has to do with two issues which we sometimes see in the debate about local content development. One being local or national tech hubs, whether you see these as a good way of enabling local content, and if you have any good or bad experiences of working together with these tech hubs, like the iHub in Nairobi, for example. And the second one being related to open source software, if that is something that you have experiences with in terms of local content. Thank you.
So I'm unsure which of our panelists would like to take that. I think Bonfis may be not a bad source of how some of these initiatives you've seen have been useful or not. But also open source, I think, is a general question of does that help lower the barriers? But do we want to start with Bonfis and then maybe Minister Milano?
Okay, thank you. Once again, from the Kenyan perspective, it's good you asked about open source, because for the last 4 years I've been involved in open source initiatives, courtesy of GIZ. We had the ICT at Innovation for Africa. The initiative actually has spurred the creation of content and mushrooming of ICT hubs. For instance, in Kenya right now, Kenya is ranked among top countries in app development, and many youth have taken up the challenge and trying to come up with local solutions, thinking globally but acting locally to provide solutions to the problems that they see in their everyday lives in the society. For instance, we've got an application, an app called M-Learning, whereby schools can subscribe and they can be able to get content through mobile phone. According to World Bank report, again, Africa is the country with the most access to mobile phones. So if we could use that, as much as we're lagging behind probably in computers, but if we use the devices to use it creatively, maybe for learning purposes or for sharing information such as mHealth. It will be of great help to the community as a whole. Thank you.
Thank you, Andy. Look at about tech hubs. They are very important. You have to. One of the key success factors of the applications ecosystems is that they are local. They are not nationwide. In the past, in terms of technology, countries were competing. The US was competing against Germany or Japan. That was in the past. Today, the competition is among cities or regions. Silicon Valley versus Boulder in Colorado versus Shenzhen or Shanghai or Tel Aviv or Guadalajara. This is not about countries, it is about cities. So part of the success is, of course, creating those local ecosystems, and tech hubs are a must. However, we have to focus because they have to define also special capabilities to do that. And we're working on that, on encouraging local ecosystems to grow with some focus, because if they try to address the whole market, they are going to fail. So, for example, in Colombia, we're developing hubs, local hubs for applications for health, other hubs for applications for e-government, so on and so forth. So the whole ecosystem is aligned. In terms of open source, of course, there are ecosystems for open source software. But you have to create the whole ecosystem. Because if you develop applications using open source, but there is not enough talent, you cannot make them sustainable. Or if the buyers do not have enough support of open source, they are going to fail. In the case of the Colombian government, we are technology agnostic. So for us, any technology is fine. We cannot make decisions on or policies that favor one or another technology, but we just favor all of them, creating or supporting the strengthening of the ecosystems.
So it's difficult for the iPhone, for the app developers to participate in the iPhone sort of app store, because you need to get approved. You can't just launch your own thing. It's difficult for users because you need a credit card, so it doesn't work for the bottom of the pyramid. So there's no question that the Android platform has been a key driver in getting apps adopted among people who don't have credit cards, or to the small extent that it has. On the other hand, it's not the cure-all either, because of the openness. What that means is there are multiple versions and variations. And on an iPhone, you just develop it for 3 screen sizes, right now, for most of the things. There's a huge variation in the size and type of phones that you develop for Android. And therefore, that's an extra effort if the app developer wants to develop an app that works on, let's say, the 100 different phones that are available that can use the app. They actually have to be backward and laterally compatible, and that's additional effort.
Thank you. If I could take the question, gentleman next to Verena Weber.
Thank you very much for giving me the floor. I am Bhashkur Bhattacharjee from Bangladesh. I work in Young Power in Social Action IPSA. The biggest barrier we are facing, there is now app-based development is going on around us, Android and different platform. Do we have any accessibility standard for application development for this developing applications for the Androids and others? Because we can see the for accessibility standards for web accessibility or content for like DAISY standards, different standards are exist for current things, but how we can ensure the content and applications which are now we are talking about the apps, so ensure the people with disabilities access, how we can have a, do you have any standard for that? That's just.
Thank you. I'll admit we're having a little difficulty hearing here at the podium. Let me turn to my panelists. And Konstantinos, maybe you can repeat the question back and make sure we've got it right, and then try to answer.
So, if I understood your question, and please jump in to correct me, is how the application environment that is being created is able to assist people with disabilities to engage either by creating it or by interacting with those applications. Am I right in understanding your question?
Yes.
Okay. So I think that this goes back to the original point that, you know, the sea is the ocean essentially, and there are so many ways to do so. I think that the previous panelist also nailed it. We have different types of platforms encouraging and the development of different types of applications. And we see this happening a lot. For example, as we heard, and this is quite true, within the Apple environment it's more difficult to create an application compared to an Android environment. Having said that, there is also the case where in an Apple environment you might have more tools to create applications for people with disabilities compared to an Android environment. So what is required is, and because we are really heavily depending on this apps economy, we need to, and probably this is where policies and the government can engage with these big companies to ensure that platforms become more flexible, that the terms of use change, that the terms of development of these applications also do change, that allow actually some very specific, specific needs of very specific companies to be addressed in a more streamlined way. And it goes back to this idea that suddenly, you know, I am not sure when it happened. Actually, I am sure when it happened, but I'm not quite sure why we don't stop this misconception that there's only a certain pool of people that can create apps, and those people need to have a credit card, or those people need to be located very close to Silicon Valley. The internet offers these unbelievable capabilities to everyone, and it actually invites, its architecture actually invites the creation of these great tools that can help these communities. So what I would say is that when it comes to policy making and creating this local ecosystem, this is a pretty good place to start, to put pressure on these developers to actually open it up so that those communities can create specific tools that can help them.
Please, Mr. Milan.
That question is very important for people with disabilities, because let me tell you a really quick story. 4 weeks ago, we were in a rural area of Colombia with the delegation of the U.S. government and the U.S. companies, looking at the projects we are doing to expand technology in the Colombian base of the pyramid. We went to this Internet Community Center, one of the 900 centers that we have, and there was a blind person there. And part of the delegation was a guy from Facebook, one of the global vice presidents of Facebook. In Colombia, we passed a law, and in Colombia, any blind person can download for free a software that reads the screen, the equivalent to JAWS, and I'm sure that a friend there knows what I'm talking about. Every license costs about $1,500, but in Colombia it's for free for everybody. So any blind person can download that software and use internet. And that has had a huge impact among the blind community, and blind persons community in Colombia. But then this guy who's blind, he said, look, my job is training other blind people on using this software. And he said, look, we're here, and look, this is a guy from Facebook. And the guy really got upset, the blind guy. Said, how come it looks like Facebook is our enemy. And we actually, we had filmed a short video addressed to Mark Zuckerberg. And then they realized how Facebook has not taken into account blind people. And the guy said, look, I'm using, Facebook 5 years ago was way easier to use by blind people than now. And that's exactly what he's talking about. Are we developing content, general content, that could be used with these kind of tools to make easy the browsing to blind people? That's critical. In Colombia, for example, we closely deal with television producers and movie producers. Why? Because we also have a program in which blind people go to the movies. But adapting the movies for blind people is complicated. So now we go, before they produce the movies, they are conscious that they have to do it in a way that it is easy to adapt it to audio describe the movies later. Or perhaps, one of our successful programs in Colombia, deaf people and mute people talk on the phone for free, every one of them, through a program that we have in the government. But the issue there is, do we have, and the way we do it is online translators. We have teleworkers, but then the problem we have is that we don't have enough translators. So how we train translators, because we have the jobs there, but we don't have people to fill them in. So we have to really work hard on making sure that technology is ready to be used by people with disabilities.
Thank you, Minister. I think I'm going to pull on this side for a second or two, and so Verena. All right, so if you could introduce yourself and hopefully a succinct question. We have about 15 more minutes, and if you could address it to one of the panelists.
Thank you very much. My name is Bilal Jamoussi. Is it on? Okay.
Yes, it is. Very good.
Okay, thank you. My name is Bilal Jamoussi. I'm from Tunisia. My intervention is more of a comment on a topic that you touched on that's critical, which is the digital financial services for the poor.
Yeah.
I just wanted to mention that recently the ITU has launched a focus group that's open to everyone to work with the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation on digital financial services. And the focus group looks at some of the topics that were mentioned by various interventions today in terms of providing a standard for transfer of money using mobile technology. The issue today is most of the mobile technology transfers are siloed within an operator and cannot be trans-operator or trans-country. And the second issue that the focus group addresses is the dialogue between the ICT regulator and the central bank, the bank regulator. So I think that foundation of a very lightweight standard could allow the application developers to be able to develop applications and have these digital financial services reach the 2.5 billion adults that have no bank accounts and no access to finance. Thank you.
Thank you for that comment. I think it goes to an important barrier we've been talking about, I'd like to come back to. Again, I welcome a show of hands. Those of you who have questions, I have a woman here in the third row. Thanks.
Yes, hello, my name is Rita. I'm from Open Knowledge, Hong Kong. And I would like to draw your attention to maybe one of the largest source of local content, and that is public sector information. And I think in all the countries which are represented on the panel, this kind of public information that is held by the government could be a great source for apps and service development. And I know India already has a law. I'm not sure about Sri Lanka, and Kenya also. So that is a very rich source and very valuable source of information, which is very often underutilized. And I think that could be a great start for developing local content. Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, here's one that I couldn't agree with more, to the point where we're actually at the OECD, we've dedicated some work way back in 2008 on this that we're revisiting. But I think you're absolutely right, particularly as we move forward in this kind of era, as commonly called big data, that government sits on a lot of it. And by opening that up, you can feed a lot of very useful applications, just easy things like transportation schedules for public transit and so forth, that have tremendous use. Other comments, questions? If not, I wouldn't, the gentleman in the front row, please.
Hello, my name is Peter Brucker. I'm the chairman of the World Summit Award. We work globally within the United Nations World Summit on Information Society process to look at how people find actually the best internet content and what are actually the contents from various different kind of countries. I have a question regarding the intervention from the minister from Colombia regarding the hubs. In which way are hubs actually also content focused, and what are the business models which people in those hubs use? I mean, obviously when you have, let's say, open knowledge and governmental content, like traffic information, this is not high quality content. But when you are just getting into the content depth and you are working with complex narratives, then the issue becomes much more interesting and also challenging.
Thank you. Minister? I think that was to you. The nature of the, if you could restate just succinctly the exact question.
I was interested in the hubs, which you were referring to, and how much they are actually also not addressing the technology side, but the content side, and what are the business models people have there for high quality content.
Yeah, and if I could add to that, if you don't mind, just how much these hubs go beyond just the technical and more to the mentoring in the business environment, some of the other maybe non-technical aspects of innovation we've been talking about.
Look at in the case of Colombia, we have a few hubs that are just being created, and we are, and you know, some of them they are specializing in different industries. And basically, what we are doing is putting together technology with a local need. For example, in an oil production area in Santander, the focus is technology for the oil industry, ICT for the oil industry. We have created one in a place called Córdoba, which is focused on ICT for cattle growing, you know, for in the coffee area, for example, we have one focus on agriculture, ICT for agriculture. So in that area, there is universities that focus on the use of technology for coffee growers, and then we also increase demand. So coffee growers there, they have tablets and cell phones, and we've deployed infrastructure in their farms so they can have access to internet. So basically what we do is not just incentivizing the growth of hubs with technology, but they have a strong link with the economic environment of the region. And another success factor of this is the leadership of the private sector. They cannot be led by the government. If they are led by the government, they die out. So that's important, and they have to be built bottoms up. This cannot be the government, let's do this and it has to be built bottoms up from the region itself with their local talent and local interest.
Great. I'd like to take the opportunity of just being the moderator here to ask a few questions of the panelists. I'd like to start off with Bonfes, because we've talked about how kind of skills are the fundamental element to a lot of what is local content development or innovation more broadly. And I'd love to hear about the Open Educational Resource for Schools initiative that you've been associated with, OER, to help improve the educational capabilities.
Thank you. OER for Schools is once again is an initiative by the Witaba Foundation, whose main aim is to seek the integration of ICT into the Kenyan education curriculum. This was basically spurred by the government's initiative to launch the one laptop per child initiative for primary schools. However, the docket that was concerned with education did not really tackle the issue of content. So we felt that there was a gap that needed to be filled. Thus, we decided to take up the initiative to try and leverage content and just provide high-quality Creative Commons open educational resources, digital books, pulling together a team of content creators and educational curriculum creators so that we can be able to achieve the mission to provide the content once the laptops are issued to the schools. Because yes, a laptop without content is like a toy, to be sincere. So but if you give a laptop with content to a child, you are empowering that child, because they'll be able to at least promote their deeper learning and understanding. Yes, and at the same time, because in Africa, most of the time it's said that the education sector has limited resources, learning resources or training resources. So even the teachers will have an easy time, because content is already there, it's open, and it's open to everyone. Any intellect who wants to come on board, they can be able to contribute, because this is it's an open license model, no copyright, no what. So we allow for deboning, whereby deboning means you can borrow content from other content creators as long as you attribute them. And then you can share, you can reuse, non-commercial under a 3.0 unported Creative Commons license.
Thank you. We've tried to be a little innovative in this session, both with remote participants, but we also have a remote question, I think, coming in from the internet.
It's a question from Kafi. Following the discussion thus far, alternative solutions that have been mentioned rely on access to the internet. In a country where access to the internet isn't reliable, how can these solutions to be implemented? Thank you.
This sounds close to what Helene was talking about. I'd be interested in her thoughts, but those of any of the other panelists as well.
So it's a question, how can apps work when reliable access to the internet doesn't exist? That's the question, I think. Yeah? Well, they don't. I mean, really. You use WAP, you use USSD, you use whatever that works on your 2.5G connections. When you've got higher speeds, you can run graphic-intensive, well-designed applications. So, sorry, like, you just need to solve all these other problems as well.
I'm going to move to start to close the session, but what I'd like to do is hear from each of the panelists with very simple, if you could, intervention. Of all the problems we've been talking about this afternoon, what do you think is the most important one to solve, and your idea for how we go about solving it? If you don't mind, I'd love to start with Minister Orlando, who I know is very quick on his feet.
Okay, the single most important problem is talent. Talent, again, at two different levels. Professional talent in IT engineers, computer science engineers, and also technicians. That's a huge problem in most countries, in Europe, in North America, in Latin America, in Africa. We don't have enough technical people. The second problem is IT skills. We need doctors that understand technology, nurses that understand technology, accountants, even lawyers that understand technology. Everybody should be a little bit of an IT professional, every single person. And that's the issue. So how to solve that issue is quite complicated, because the problem of talent, of professionals today, is that young people do not want to pursue these careers. There are different reasons, and we have to reposition these careers. We have to make these careers more sexy. We have to increase the sex appeal of these careers. And of course, in terms of IT skills of people, we have to work very hard in increasing, changing the curricula in universities and making sure that everybody the new students are also being trained in technology. And for the old ones, we have to create programs to train people and develop those IT skills.
Konstantinos.
Thank you. I'll be very brief. Infrastructure, both at the technology level, meaning IXPs, and we heard about what can we do when the internet is not reliable. Build more IXPs, allow the traffic to run locally, so it is non-expensive and it's more stable. But also infrastructure at the level of the socioeconomic level, policies and incentives that allow people to engage and create this local content, be it a blog or an app.
Thank you very much. Manfis.
Okay, just to echo the sentiments my colleagues have mentioned. One is policy, because if we have policies are responsible for making strong commitments towards something. So, for instance, I'll give a situation, maybe just to go a bit out of the topic. In Kenya, right now, there's a policy in the communication sector whereby at least local content on television or radio has to be about 40% of it has to be Kenyan. So if you promote policy, if you set a policy to be able to make people at least adhere to a certain law. And then the second issue I say is human resource. Do you have the technical capacity to deal or develop with, apps that can be able to provide local solutions? And then necessity. It's always said necessity is the mother of all inventions. So is there the need to educate that maternal, maybe mothers and with information on maternal health or such things? If so, can we be able to provide it through mobile or maybe apps such as mHealth? And if we're able to provide them, do they have access? So access at the end of the day then remains the big issue, in as much as we have the solution. Thank you.
Thank you, Bonfis. And Helani?
Different players. I think the regulators need to get their act together, give out enough spectrum, take away the bottlenecks on the internet value chain so prices come down and speeds increase. I think the governments need to put out as much data, digitize, and as close to real time as possible so people can play around with it, open data, and create apps. I think the central banks or financial regulators need to work with the telecom regulators and banking platform people and make sure we can get payments to young app developers. If you do those three things, The other two people I didn't talk about, which is the private sector and the hackers and the app developers, have enough incentive. App developers want to make money, and they can't do so right now. The private sector, especially the network operators, their voice revenues are going down. They need to drive data revenues up. Apps do that. And so they'll do enough training and get the ecosystems going as long as the frameworks are there. And that's what the government and the regulator should do.
Thank you very much. Let me draw this to a close and just say I think we've had a great discussion with 4 different continents participating, some of them here at the table. I want to thank the participants of the panelists, but I also want to thank the remote participants, some of whom got up very early in the morning to participate. And I'd like to thank all of you for what's been a sacrificing part of your lunch hour, but also active participation. And last but not least, the technicians who helped to make this one happen. Thank you very much. Have a good afternoon.
Discussing how to solve it, but I saw 40 people could help us.
So what I do is that I'd like to connect you with a regional bureau director in the area, Sebastián Lagamba. He's based in Uruguay.
Sebastián.
Do you know Sebastián?
Yeah. You know, draw me an email with his contact details. I want him to go to Colombia, and we have to make the problem we have is huge, IXP. And then we're going to have a meeting with all the ministries of ICT of South America. And that's one of the issues that we have.
But I'm not saying
I will
Me quedé sin lunch por ti.
Don Juan Carlos.
Me voy a dar un abrazo. Me quedé. Ahorita mandaste. Porque de Colombia se me llegó.
Yeah, okay, I'll try not to be first because this is not to talk to you.
He likes tamashas.
He likes to party or?
Yeah, he just likes hanging out with people.
No way.
See this man in Sharm el Sheikh. Yeah. Pleasure to meet you. Sharm el Sheikh. Do not say negative things about. Actualízalo una vez. No te digas, me quedé sin tarjeta. I'm still standing.
Hey, pleasure being on time. Namaste. From India? No, from Sri Lanka. Yeah.
Solines.es.
Yo te mando después los míos ahí.
Sí. ¿Tu teléfono cuál es?
Ahí te lo mando.
Me mandas todo ahí.
Quedamos en contacto.
Yeah. Let me introduce you to WSA. El premio que dan cada domingo, como los Oscars de Internet. La mejor aplicación de contenido. It would be great if you guys can really make a Colombia work. So long. But no, I've been meeting. I will help you. Just need it. Well, thanks. But it was hardware used to learn networks and stuff, and not content. So this would be great for you.
I work in Canada, in Austria, things like this.
I don't know.
Oh, I'm sorry. I know.
I worked with WCD before. I'm sorry.
Yeah,
I just
so
haven't had the. I'm sure you'll sign some documents. I worked on the Columbia review.
Exactly.
Okay. Yes.
Gracias.